to introduce Alan, for those of you who aren't familiar with him. He is one of 3 planning foresters for the city of Raleigh. He's been in that position for about 2 months now, so he's still learning the way of the world that city of Raleigh does things. But prior to that, he was an urban forestry inspector for City of Raleigh, and then before that, he was urban forestry specialist with the North Carolina Forest Service. And he was in that position for a handful of years. I want to say 5 or 6 years there, maybe a few more. So if you are a North Carolina resident or work with a municipality across the state, you've probably come across him in some form or fashion over that time frame. Alan graduated from Texas A&M University with a degree in forestry and has since worked in both the private and the public sector dealing with urban forestry issues. He is a North Carolina registered forester and a certified arborist. So with that, Alan, you can go ahead and get started.
All right. Thank you, Leslie. As Leslie said, my name is Alan Moore, and I'm a planning forester with the city of Raleigh. I've not been in this position for very long, but I am still learning the ways of the Raleigh Municipal Unified Development Ordinance. And as a planning forester, that's mainly what I do, is look at development plans and see if those development plans are complying with our development ordinance. And prior to this, yes, I did work with the North Carolina Forest Service for about almost 10 years. So quite a bit of time here in North Carolina. But I did grow up in Houston, Texas, and one of the main things that I enjoyed, or that got me into forestry, was just the benefits of trees, which I think the benefits of trees that we enjoy in our cities, one of the main benefits, and keep this in mind as I'm talking through this presentation, is just the benefits that trees provide, and number one in my mind being shade. And especially with this upcoming summer, I think we can all enjoy or look forward to enjoying the shade that trees provide. But in our cities and towns, trees can also help us reduce our energy costs. That shade can provide less need for air conditioning costs. Trees also function to clean the air. Our cities and towns, a lot of them have some air quality issues. If we keep some trees around, they function to help clean the air. There are also economic benefits to trees. Studies have been done over the years that show that people tend to shop in areas, or prefer to shop in areas where there are trees, and they tend to linger a little bit longer, which may lead to a little bit more spending on their part. So the trees have an economic benefit in that way. Trees can also screen our views. So if there's a particular view that we don't want to see, trees can help block that out. Trees in our urban environments also reduce the glare from buildings and other concrete and glass. Trees also improve our health with the cleaner air. Also, trees help to improve our mental health. If we can get out of our office buildings or wherever we're working, go outside, sit amongst the trees, even touch the trees. Studies have shown that trees can improve our mental health. And trees can also buffer the noise that we hear coming from our urban environments, helps to filter that out. And also trees, just with their rustling of leaves in the wind, can provide some white noise. Trees also attract wildlife. A lot of our urban environments, places where we live, see a lot of songbirds, and that's quite a popular hobby for many people. So having trees to attract wildlife can be a benefit. And trees also function to slow runoff. A lot of communities are facing problems with stormwater runoff, rainwater runoff. Trees can do a lot to slow down that runoff and capture some of the rain, and in that way they also prevent erosion. And another benefit to having trees in our cities and towns is that they add property value. So just keeping all those benefits of trees in our cities and towns in mind, you'll understand the importance of keeping trees in our cities and towns. And now, like I said, I've been here in the Raleigh area for about 10 years now, and just driving to and from work each and every day, I've seen a lot of development going on. And even when I was with the North Carolina Forest Service, I visited many communities all across the state and saw lots of development going on. But just to give you a kind of a zoomed in picture of Raleigh, here's in 1988, you can see in the top left of the screen, there's an aerial shot of an area in Raleigh. This is Capitol Boulevard. On the kind of left center there, that wide swath of pavement. And if you're familiar with Raleigh, this is kind of the area where the Triangle Town Center Mall eventually will show up in these next couple of slides. But you can see what it looked like back in 1988. And you can see the development in 1999. There's some clearing there to the left of Capitol Boulevard. And you can also maybe start seeing where 540 was going to be built. So in 2005, you can see they got the Triangle Town Center Mall already built there, and 540 is almost completed there. But you can just think about the number of trees that were removed. Perhaps some of the benefits that I talked about previously were lost. Then you can see 2011. There's still more development going on just around this particular area. And then 2017, here's another aerial photo. Just compare to what it looked like back in 1988. You can see the amount of development going on. A lot of areas that were once treed have given way to pavement and other development. And this development is likely to continue. These are some next couple of slides just showing the average acres or per housing units, and just how that has grown across the state in the last number of years. 1940, this is what the housing units look like. 1950, the areas that are getting less green and more orange and red are increasing in development. You see 1960, Charlotte, Winston-Salem, Greensboro, Raleigh, they're all growing. In 1970, more housing units are being developed. Even along the coast, you can see those areas. They're getting more orange and red and yellow. And through the 80s and the 90s, you can see that development going on. Even into 2000. And now these slides are showing a prediction for 2010. This study was done prior to 2010, so they made a prediction that this is what development would look like in 2010 as far as housing units. And on into 2020 and 2030, these are further projections as to what the average acres per housing unit would be. So as you can see, and you can probably identify where your community lies on this map, see what kind of development may be facing your community. And so the reasons to keep trees when developing are all those benefits that I talked about earlier. Providing shade to our houses in the subdivisions, helping homeowners reduce their energy costs, cleaning the air. As our communities develop, we need more trees around to help clean the air. Using the trees for the economic benefits that they provide as our cities grow. screening the views. As mixed uses come in, uses develop right against each other, maybe helping to screen some of those views to keep them separated, reducing the glare, buffering noise, slowing runoff. Like I said before, a lot of rainwater, stormwater. If we can use trees to help in rainwater control, stormwater control. So, and really trees are an asset. Just to give you a perspective, all these pictures across the top are what the particular site looks like without trees. And then if you add trees, just look at the shade provided. You can imagine the glare that's being reduced with these trees being planted where they are. Now granted, it might have been better to have preserved some trees if they were already on site, but perhaps they weren't, and so they've had to plant some new trees in these areas. But I think that we can all agree that it does look a whole lot better when we have trees in our urban environments. So, and as part of that, Raleigh likes our tree. We like our trees, and in 2013 passed the Unified Development Ordinance, and there are quite a few things that go into development, and part of the Unified Development Ordinance is our Chapter 9 that deals with trees, and that particular intent of that chapter, you can read the intent there, but really it is to preserve the tree coverage, preserve mature trees, and also preserve the buffers so that we can lessen the impact of development on the surrounding properties. And a lot of times, conserving trees, there's a perception out there that preserving trees does one thing or the other, but in reality, it's a little bit different. It may be the perception that trees can never be touched, but with the UDO, the reality is that development activity is what triggers compliance with the development ordinance. There's also a perception that, well, conserving these trees is going to cost too much to me as a developer. But there's reality is that conserving trees can lead to higher profits for developers. So as developers are developing subdivisions, even shopping centers, doing things to keep the trees around, conserving the trees, like I said before, can lead to more people enjoying the benefits of trees, and so they want to live in subdivisions where there are trees around, where they can enjoy the shade, they can enjoy the wildlife that may be attracted, and even, like I said, shopping centers where there are trees around. People tend to shop a little bit longer, linger a little bit longer, and so those can actually lead to higher profits. Even office complexes that are built and keep the trees around. Some studies have shown that occupancy rates, people enjoy going to work and being able to look out and see the trees, and so they tend to like the location where they're working. So that can lead to less vacancies and less turnover rates, so keeping the companies where they are. There may also be the perception that well, every tree has to be saved. Well, the reality is with the UDO that only specified parts of a site are required to be saved, and I won't go through all the parts of the UDO in detail, but just knowing that there's not every tree has to be saved. And there's also maybe the perception that there's a bunch of rigid rules that have to be followed. Now, there are rules, yes, but there's quite a bit of flexibility within the code. And it's all an effort to allow development, but at the same time helping to conserve the healthy trees. And when we have healthy trees, it leads to the continued productivity of the forest. So they're continuing to provide the stormwater control, helping to keep those buffers in place and keep the productivity, all the benefits that the trees are providing, keep those going. So part of our City of Raleigh tree protection is the UDO, and we also rely on our city tree manual, and also the details that go into letting developers and anybody else who's wanting to do some construction activities know what is expected. And just one of the details talks about tree protection fencing, and I'll go into some details here later. But all these things, the UDO, the city tree manual, and those details all work together to keep the trees in our community, and we keep benefiting from having those trees. So another important part of the City of Raleigh tree protection is enforcement of the code. And we do this through a variety of ways. We can put administrative holds on developments to make sure that development doesn't start without certain things like tree protection fences being installed, making sure that what is drawn up on plans actually gets implemented out there in the field. We also have permits that need to be issued to do certain things, whether it's removing a tree, establishing those tree conservation areas, even working on trees, pruning, that sort of thing. So, and we also have inspections, and we currently have one urban forestry inspector. We're hoping to get another one here soon, but we do have inspections so that someone is actually checking these things to make sure that those tree fences are put up, that trees are planted where they need to be, trees are not removed, or if trees are applied to be removed, then the right ones get removed. And through this, developers learn what to expect, and just working with the developers, they start to understand what the city is trying to do. And it's more of a carrot approach as opposed to the stick approach, but we still do have penalties for violations, and it could be fines and or replanting of trees. So the city is really wanting to do more of a carrot than a stick, but sometimes it does take a stick approach. So some basic concepts of tree protection, and I'll go over these: the critical root zone, fencing, tree fencing, tree armor, and then also communicating to developers and contractors. So in the City of Raleigh, we have established the critical root zone as being a 1 1/4 foot radius per every inch of DBH. So for example, we have a 12-inch DBH tree. The critical root zone would be a 15-foot radius that extends out all around the tree. So I know there are some other critical root zone establishment, and this particular piece from a different publication talks about a good, better, and best. And yes, I think we have a good critical root zone established. Maybe it could be better. And really, what we're trying to do is protect the critical root zone, because trees don't grow like on the left. A lot of times folks think of, trees are just, or the root system of the tree just mirrors the top. In actuality, it doesn't. Trees' roots grow more like the picture on the right, where the the tree roots are spread out. And so protecting that critical root zone, we protect the root system, which the trees depend on for keeping them alive. So establishing that tree fence, we do have our details that we put in the plans and make the developers and contractors follow. We specify what the tree fence should look like, the materials that needs to be put up, and how to put them around the trees. You can see in the detail on the right. So whether it's tree fence being installed to protect a whole group of trees, a tree conservation area, or even if it's just tree fences being put up to protect individual trees already established within the city. So we've got a number of trees in our rights-of-way that as development comes in throughout the city, buildings are being renovated, new buildings are being built, those sorts of things. There are trees in the right-of-way that we want to keep growing, and so we want contractors and developers to recognize that, and so we make them put up these tree protection fences and to protect the critical root zone of those trees. It's not just necessarily to protect the visible parts of the tree above ground. It's to get the critical root zone, because the roots extend further than just right underneath the tree there. Some other examples from other cities would be a little bit more substantial than perhaps the orange plastic fencing with a wire backing. This particular fence is probably a little bit more substantial to protect this tree, and that may be necessary in your community if you're wanting to protect a certain tree. Just making folks more aware that, hey, this is a tree we are really interested in protecting, and so we're putting up a little more physical barrier that's a little bit harder for people to just kind of run over or say they don't notice. Even going so far as this fencing that was installed at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, you can see they put up a chain link fence and some kind of fabric on the fence, and then they put up a big old sign there that says, hey, we're protecting this tree, just to make people more aware, that the trees are important and worth protecting. So Raleigh hasn't gone to this yet, but who knows, we may see that someday in the future. I don't know. Another thing that may be useful would be a tree armor. And now the city of Raleigh, I know we've done this in some projects, particularly in park projects, is just a layer of 2x4s put around the trunk of the trees, and it's really to protect already established trees that there's maybe some certain detail of the project going on that's going to get right up next to the trees. So we want to give an extra layer of protection that as equipment or whatever has to move through a certain area, that the tree doesn't get accidentally knocked into or nicked or scraped. It's just another physical barrier to try and protect the tree. And we've done this on also protecting the similar layout here, also protecting the scaffold branches. I know there is a project going on where we've had to remove a restroom facility and are installing a new restroom facility, but there was a large chestnut oak that had some large branches that overhung the restroom facility, and so wanted to protect the scaffold branches when that facility was being torn down, just protect it from any kind of equipment accidentally bumping into it. So they put up these 2x4s around the scaffold branches. And now these 2x4s are not attached to the tree. They are just wired together and put around the tree. So communicating to developers and contractors, there a variety of methods to get the point across. In the review process, just explaining why we need tree protection, not going into all the details of how trees grow and why they need the roots and all that kind of stuff, but just explaining that the city values the trees and wants to protect the trees, and so that they will continue to provide the benefits that the city enjoys. So explaining what's expected, talking about putting up the tree protection fences. We also have on-site meetings where our inspector goes out and makes sure that those tree fences are put up properly, showing them what's expected, and also showing them what not to do. If there's breaches in the fence, making sure that they correct that, making sure that the signage is up, and that explaining even on site, why we need signs every 50 feet, and also around corners. Just making sure that the contractors know, hey, these trees are worth protecting, so this is why we're having these signs put up. And also our inspectors have the authority to issue stop work orders if something isn't correct. If they drive by a site and see that the tree fence is being breached, they can issue a stop work order until that tree fence is installed back properly. So, and it's also important to communicate to developers the importance of that critical root zone, and so that they don't see it just as a contractor irritation zone. If you put up all the little tree fence, invariably it's going to be a nice place to store things. So you want to keep those tree fences up in that critical root zone, so that the roots are protected. And so it'd be better where possible to preserve groups of trees rather than just individual trees, and really trying to protect the roots, preserving the understory and whatever existing forest floor might be there. As trees grow up in the forest and in the woods, they kind of form a relationship with each other and start relying on other trees around to buffer them from the winds. Every tree has its kind of place in the forest, and if trees are cut out, some of those trees on the edge that were not used to the winds previously are now exposed. So protecting the trees in groups is better for keeping the productivity of that forest going. So there are some other resources out there that talk about tree loss on a construction site, how to plan and prepare for development and construction on the tree site. And some of these are a little bit more than what a city may want to engage with a particular developer or contractor, but if it may be worth if there's just a specific site, getting contractors, developers to understand some of this stuff, they can maybe see the benefits of having the trees protected in our urban environments. So like I said, Bartlett has a resource here, and they're talking about planning for construction around trees, preparing the site. That talks about what to do during construction and even post-construction. If there's somehow trees got damaged, some corrective measures that may be taken. So Cooperative Extension has a really good publication. Talks about before construction, during construction, and after construction. Even has some ideas about setting up some kind of recognition program to recognize those developers, contractors who are doing right by the trees, and by that also right by the city for trying to achieve keeping the benefits of having trees around. Another one is from Dr. Kim Coder, has a publication talking about conserving trees during site development, and he talks about pre-construction, during construction, what should be done, and even post-construction. And now this particular publication is a little bit more for tree professionals. So if you're an arborist out there or a forester, this may be talking about some things, more things that that you understand as opposed to maybe what a developer or contractor might understand about trees and how they grow and what the impacts of development on the trees would be. So all in all, these are some good publications to reference, look back on. Of course, there's other resources. Arbor Day Foundation has some good resources out there. Morton Arboretum, and you can look these up on the internet, find all kinds of information about construction and trees. Cooperative Extension from other states. I know North Carolina Cooperative Extension is really good, but there's some other states that have some similar information that maybe give you a little bit different perspective on how other states are doing things. And of course, the ANSI standards and the accompanying best management practice guide talk about managing trees during construction. So that's another great resource to take a look at. So I just also wanted to just talk about the municipal perspective and just give you an idea of what some other cities besides Raleigh have. And now I've just randomly chosen a few cities here in North Carolina, and this is not a competition nor some kind of indictment of what may or may not be in each city, but I just found these interesting. Charlotte, in their land development division, they do have a tree ordinance which talks about public right-of-way trees that need to be protected during development. Also talks about private property development, which trees need to be protected. And they do have inspectors that go out and make sure that the tree protection is as it should be. And you can check out their website, see what all they have. Also, Asheville is another example city. They have a unified development ordinance. It talks about public trees and some private property trees, which trees need to be saved, which trees need to be conserved. Greensboro is another example. They have a land development ordinance. It talks about as opposed to a unified development ordinance. I guess they have a little bit different, but so they talk about tree conservation on development sites. They also do inspections, which is very key to any kind of tree protection. You know, you've got to have someone that goes behind and makes sure that out in the field things are as they should be. So, City of Wilmington, they in their land development code, they talk about tree protection, which trees need to be protected. They also talk about having an inventory done before any development, so certain trees are protected. And Southern Pines, they have they have a unified development ordinance, unified development code there, and it talks about tree protection. And also I saw in there that they talk about conservation subdivisions. That's maybe a little bit different way of going about developing subdivisions than maybe the typical idea of just clearing the land and coming back in, putting homes, and then planting new trees. So conservation subdivisions are talking about look and see what's already there and developing around the natural resources. So that's I thought that was a kind of an interesting and slightly different way of looking at development. So with that, I want to say thank you for tuning in today. And if you wanted to see more about City of Raleigh and the what we're doing, just raleighnc.gov, and in the search box you can look up the Unified Development Ordinance in the search box.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alan. So we've got some time here to answer some questions. If you guys wanted to ask Alan to kind of clarify on anything or get his input on how things go. So to ask questions, we ask for you to type it into the chat box, and we'll bring attention to it and give Alan a minute or two to respond. And we'll go that way, and we'll be able to work our way through all the questions there. While everybody is working towards asking a question or two, while we have Alan on the call or on the screen, I'm going to go ahead and throw back up the slides that I had earlier for folks that are wanting or needing ISA credits. What you'll do is you'll just take note, write down that code at the bottom, the PP-18-094, and then you'll do a self-reporting through ISA. If you guys have never done self-reporting through ISA, then just send me an email, and I've got the form that you would submit to ISA that way, and you'll get 1 credit hour for today's webinar. So now we've got anybody that has a question. I haven't seen anybody typing in there, but so I want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you do have questions as you're potentially maybe developing your ordinance or contemplating working tree protection into your ordinance or some kind of policy, you can always contact me or Alan Moore. I can get everybody his email address if you guys are interested to bounce some ideas off of. You also have the North Carolina Forest Service, the Urban and Community Forestry Program, would be able to offer some resources or some input there to figure out what the best mechanism is, or give you some advice on how to best do that if you've not worked tree protection into your ordinance, how best to go about that so that you're not going out of bounds on that anywhere. So you've got the ISA code there. We do have one question that came in. See if I can read through it. I may have missed it, but when there is no other option but to enter the protection zone, how close can you get to the tree before being overly concerned for digging or for impacting the root system itself? Is there a distance limitation there, Alan?
Yeah. Yes, on certain projects, if as a general guideline, you want to not impact any more than about 30% of the root system. And I know for some projects, it may be unavoidable. So take a look at that, and it may just be having to redesign a project, or if you're going to damage more of the root system than about 30%, taking measures to mitigate that damage, or like I said, redesigning the project. and really it depends on the health of the tree to begin with. If you have a tree in such poor condition, damaging its roots may just add to the problem. So, entering that tree protection zone, like I say, general guideline, don't want to damage any more than about 30%. So it really is a case-by-case, individual basis to assess the tree and what kind of damage might be done.
Okay, that's a great question. But yeah, so it is, as Alan said, it is tree by tree. You kind of have to you take into consideration the species of the tree, the size of the tree, the health of that tree before you start doing any kind of impact to the root system itself. It's always something to take into mind. We have another question here from Connie. It says, what happens to tree fines? And I'm assuming, maybe, are you talking about in regarding to going into the tree protection zone on that one, Connie? I wasn't sure, but Alan, you can kind of interpret that how you want, I guess, at this point.
Okay. The tree fines, fines go into and I'm not entirely sure on this. I haven't been here working with city for very long, but it does go into I guess a fund for planting more trees in the city. Like I say, I'm not exactly sure where that fine goes. I understand, having worked with the North Carolina Forest Service and seeing a bunch of different communities and what they did, there are some communities that set up a special tree mitigation fund, or tree planting fund, I should say, where they have a certain account dedicated to planting trees, and that's where all those
and
fines
that
go
is,
to.
it's kind of, I'm not sure how City of Raleigh works, but I know that there are a handful of communities across the state that have been successful in keeping fines that were put in place for either because there was damage to a tree, or when they have like in lieu of fines. So if a developer or contractor wants to remove a tree, but the city wants to retain it, they have allowed contractors to remove that tree, but they have to pay for it essentially, and they come up with that dollar figure of kind of like a replacement value. And I have seen success where it doesn't just go into the general fund. So you need to make sure, if you're a municipality and you are going to start charging a fee or a fine to remove a tree, or if case there was a tree that was accidentally damaged that was supposed to be protected, that you have a system in place within your municipality that goes to a tree mitigation fund. Or I know the city of Durham, they've been able to use the Keep Durham Beautiful group out there as a way to make sure that the funds that are developed, or the revenue from those fines, goes back into their tree care program, whether it's through their tree planting or actually being able to use some of those funds for maintenance and management in the long run. So it kind of depends on how your municipality is set up.
Right. And I'd work with, if need be, get the legal team of your municipality to help set that up.
So we have another question. How big a penalty is necessary to prevent developers from just considering fines as a cost of doing business?
I'm not sure how big a penalty. And I'm not sure what exactly I know it's in our code as far as a certain dollar amount for the penalties, and it's like per inch of diameter of tree that was removed, and then on top of that they have to replace with the same size of tree or a number of trees that equals the diameter. Just an example, if they cut down I don't know, a 50-inch tree, there's no way they're going to replant a 50-inch tree. So a number of trees that would equal that 50 inches. But how big, I think it would depend on what the community is trying to do. Like I say, you can look at our UDO and see what kind of fines are listed there. But really just trying to work with developers to get them to understand the importance of keeping trees around instead of just considering it as a cost of doing business. Just trying to get them to see the importance of keeping trees in the development.
That's a tough question there, because there is no like threshold really. It kind of depends on the contractor and what they're willing, and the size of the development. Because I've seen, just from my experience, and Alan, you can chime in here with your experience with other municipalities as well, is if a developer or a contractor is dead set on putting in a certain type of building in a certain location, there really isn't too much you can do to get them to not do it. The idea isn't to make it so painful for them that they're not going to want to develop and build in your community. It's, you're trying to develop a good relationship with the developing world, so you don't want to just kind of throw everything at them. But the larger developers with the larger developments, they're not going to bat an eye at a $60,000 to $100,000 fine for some reason. But if you make your ordinance and the fee system be flexible enough, so you can kind of work with them. It's kind of give and take, so that you can try to get them to see maybe saving some trees, not necessarily all the ones that would be that you would want or would like to see in it, just because it would impact their construction too much. But you kind of give and take. So I'm not sure there is an actual threshold number there, because it all kind of depends on the size of the development and how determined that person is or that group is into building on that site. But for the most part, if you make it flexible enough and you can entice them enough with giving them the recognition, giving them, kind of enticing them to make it easy on them to protect those trees up front, then you're more likely to get that protection without too much backlash and too many problems during the project itself. That's just my experience, from working with developers and municipalities when I was a municipal forester.
Yeah, I would agree. Just working with the development, establishing that relationship, trying to get in developers to see the benefits of developing with trees instead of developing against trees. Because if developers coming in, they want to keep working in the city, they want to make it or have as easy a time as possible, and the city wants to have an easy time working with them as well. So just giving that or having that give and take and developing a balance, so that everybody can accomplish the goals of developing our communities and keeping the trees out there functioning as
right.
they
and I would say if you're from a municipal perspective, if you're just getting into the whole tree protection realm of things, you need to be careful with your verbiage when you're writing those tree protection ordinances and the steps or requirements you're going to require developers and contractors to take for tree protection, and making sure that they're actually protecting the trees that are in a good enough condition to warrant saving. Because I have come across a handful of municipalities that, with their language, some of the tree save areas haven't made much sense, because the species of trees or the quality of trees that they have in those tree protection zones aren't going to provide any kind of long-lasting benefit for the site. So you want to make sure it's going to be a site-by-site basis. You want to make sure you write in enough flexibility that you're taking the steps or allowing some to be able to work from site to site to try and protect the best kind of trees that are going to be able to survive and provide the biggest benefits down the road. Because if they have them save a bunch of shrubbery, or poorly conditioned trees just because it's they have to save a certain percent, then it doesn't make much sense because they're going to be in there doing work to remove those trees in the long run down the road. So you just got to be kind of smart with it, make sure that your policies are written with a certain amount of flexibility in there. But that's just my recommendation from working with municipalities and other projects. But so I didn't see any other questions come in. You can email me or Alan. I can get you his contact information if you think of things after we're done with this webinar system or series. So I just wanted to draw your attention to we have 2 more webinars that are scheduled for 2018 coming up, one in July and then again another one in October. We've got the importance of partnerships in community forestry. We actually have Dana Karcher with Arbor Day Foundation is going to be joining us for that one, and then Dr. Barbara Fair will be the speaker presenter for our October 17th one on proper pruning techniques that every community should understand. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for one or both of those. We will again have ISA credits available for those as well. They're throwing this back up there just in case you didn't get a chance to write it down there. But I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. Hopefully you were able to take 1 or 2 things back with you, learn from it, and kind of build your tree protection program within your municipality. So thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll see you in July.